your face to everyone.
Hi.
Hi, hey Andrew. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm very good. Andrew, can you bring your face is cutting from the top slightly.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So Art Circle is a sort of a community of visual artists and art lovers. It's a very new initiative that I started very recently. Being an art lover myself and an amateur artist, so this is part of my interest right now. Um, Andrew is from Bangalore, and I would have him give his introduction of his own journey as an artist, from being a marketeer to be a MFA now and pursuing his art practice full time. And then he will walk us through his session details, like how his session will span in 1.5 hour. Um, After that, we would actually like some of you to share some introduction of yourself. Where are you joining from, and your interest in visual art and in abstract art in particular. And if there is something that we should address in this session. Um, I can see we have a lot of people joining in, so we may not be able to have everyone speak, but I would take a few names here and there, and I'll ask you for your introduction. And if in case I don't take your name, and if you really want to talk, then just please raise your hand, and we'll have you talk to us. So good. So over to you, Andrew.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the session. First of all, how do I do the share screen?
Share. Okay, let me actually, I should allow you to. Are you not able to share a screen by yourself? Because I can't see an option.
It was disabled the
You.
attendee screen share.
Okay, just give me a minute. Karthik, can you have a look at because I don't. So generally, I should have access to check which participant I can allow. Okay, let me just look at here.
Okay. Till the time she's doing that, I will take you through my journey in a bit. So basically, like any other person who's trying to find his passion, I started off drawing and sketching and painting when I was a young kid. And during my college days is when I started getting more serious about art, I think. And from there, the journey began. And I had done I started doing some of my works. I'd done some of my paintings then, like in the sense I had showcased with some galleries, with in an arts event, sort of like it was called it's in Bangalore. It's called Soul Sante. It's sort of like an art event wherein you have food, fashion, and art. And during that time, I had showcased my first set of paintings, which I had painted. So a lot of my works, basically, my journey has been dabbling between pursuing my passion and also having a job in hand so that I can pay for the paints and a lot of other materials that I buy for my work. And it's not easy. It takes a lot of time and patience. I'll just one second.
Yeah, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, can I share? Is it sharing?
It's not.
Now?
Yes, it does.
Okay, interesting. So, so it's been a long journey. It's been 10 years since I've been painting and creating works, been exhibiting my works. One of my most prestigious moments in my life has been when my work was published in Oxford Encyclopedia in 2015. Um, my work, Mighty My Savior, which was basically a painting of Christ the Savior, was a dream that I'd seen, a vision that I'd seen, which I'd painted, and it got published in Oxford Encyclopedia, which basically gave me sort of like this a push towards being seen by media, being seen by galleries, because it's tough to have your work displayed in galleries. I think not. I wouldn't say like it's more about like validation, and a lot of people validate art with the success that you have. Um, it's not just on your talent basis. Um, so the first so the session Prerna had shared was how to decode abstract art, and I I know by the end of the session I don't think any of you would be able to decode art, but I assure you that you'll be able to understand what abstract art is or what it broadly means. And so the session will go with, I would give you an idea about how abstract art is and a brief, very, very brief history about art and how abstraction came into existence. Because if we go deep into art and understanding abstraction, it'll never end because it's a long process. So there are a lot of pictures and there are a lot of activity, not a lot of activities, but there's one activity which will help you understand better what abstraction is. And I would take you through two of my works, one painting and one video work, a film. So that's about it. And then finally, I was working with Yahoo. The last company that I worked with was Yahoo before I moved to London to do my master's in fine art. And that was quite a tough decision because it was quite a good, well-paying job. But heart of heart, I knew that I wanted to pursue art in a much serious way, and I then quit my job and moved to London to pursue my art studies. And then because of Corona, I got back, and now let's see how things will work out. Okay, so I think she'll take you.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. It was a great introduction. I want to have few people in our audience speak to us about themselves and their interest or any experience with abstract art. So I'm just gonna take few names. I would see there is someone, Kriti Maheshwari. Kriti, do you like to speak about yourself?
I'm Kriti. I'm actually I'm into education sector. I have recently done my MA, and my interest in arts was from childhood only, but it mainly emerged in the time when I was doing the BLed graduation. I was doing. I have a class for art and craft for education. So we have to make the props, art structure. It's like a storybooks kind of things to teach children to use them for our education purpose. So then it emerged at that time. From 2 years, I love making art. So I'm exploring different forms. I have no idea about abstract art till now. So that's why I want to attend this session so I can know something about abstract art.
Great, sure, and I hope you learn something and enjoy the session too.
Yeah.
We have someone, Sashwati Nayak. Sashwati, do you like to talk about yourself? Okay. We then have Mindy. Mindy, do you like to share your introduction with us? Okay. We have Priyanka. Priyanka, do you want to talk to us about your your interest in abstract art? Priyanka Jain.
I think Mindy sent a chat saying just an amateur. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Then who else? Who wants to speak? We have Pallavi with us here. Pallavi, do you want to share your experience or your interest?
Yeah, I am actually a German language translator and I'm also learning Japanese right now. So my interest in art and painting came through my grandfather, I would say. And also while learning languages, we came across some artists and also introduction to museums. And then actually I wanted to learn more about art and various forms of art. Yeah.
See, okay. I'm gonna have just one or two more names now, and after that, maybe we shall start the session, and maybe towards the end we can have few of our audience speak to us more. Um, I can see there is someone Hitesha Mukherjee. If Hitesha you wants to talk to us. Okay. Then let me see who else. Diksha, do you want to talk to us?
Hi, Prerna. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, hi Diksha.
Hi. So I'm a graphic designer, and my interest in abstract art started from museum. To be honest, you know, where you see so many things and you don't know how to decode it until and unless you read the Wikipedia page about it, right? So that's why I'm here to see what this is about and learn more about it. So yeah.
Great. Okay, sure. We also have Kartar here. I know Kartar, you already messaged us in the chat. Do you want to say a few things before we start? Okay. All right. I think we'll start, but it was nice talking to you, Deeksha, and a few of you guys. It was good to know your interest. Um, I'll I'll put it over to Andrew now. Andrew, do you want to take us through the session?
So the session is it's very simple. I have made the whole. It was quite text heavy earlier, and Prerna told me to make it much simpler so that everybody enjoys it. There are a lot of gifs that I've added, but like I think a lot of gifs have been revealed already. But let's take you through this. Okay, first I'm going to ask you a question to everybody, and everybody, if whoever wants to answer can answer, and if you don't feel like answering, it's okay, but you can even send it on chats. How many of you have been to galleries, museums, exhibitions, art fairs, trade fairs, and seen paintings or sculptures or films, and it's made you puzzled and confused because you don't get the context of it, or you're not able to understand what it means. How many of you have had the same experience of seeing art and
Yes, it happens a lot. Yes.
It happens a lot.
Yes.
Could you specify a little bit on which exhibition you went to, or which museum you went to, or which artist that you saw?
It was a wooden sculpture exhibition in Bangalore.
Okay.
It was a couple of years back on Kanakpura Road. So there, the sculptures are very great works of skill, but I couldn't understand many of the concepts. Even though they explained, I'm sure they had something else in mind, and probably us as a viewer had something else in mind.
Okay. Thank you. That was. Could you tell your name? I'm sorry. Can't figure out who it's.
Okay. Hello, sir. Good evening.
Hi. You can call me Andrew. I'm not.
Okay.
You can call me sir.
Good
Please.
evening, Andrew.
Yeah.
I've been to Tate Modern in London. You know that contemporary art, or sometimes like in the surface, you don't understand anything unless you read the caption, what the art is trying to say, all those things.
Yeah.
But some are very simple. Like there was a mirror. We just need to see in the mirror and we interpret whatever we think. That's it. So it's up to the viewers, whatever they think.
So the mirror was, you just saw a mirror, or was it like,
Yeah.
it was like a convex mirror?
No. It was a normal looking
Plain.
mirror.
Yeah. By
It-
whom? What was the artist's name? Do you remember? Was it Anish Kapoor?
No. It was before 2 years, so I forgot. No, not Anish. It's not Anish. Yeah, it was not. So the mirror is not placed on the wall, but it was like a square shape. He built in all the sides, 4 sides.
Okay.
So it was just to take selfies and post it in Instagram, something like that. It's as simple as that.
Okay. So yeah, so you've seen that GIF 1,000 times, I think, now because of math. This is how, do you feel like this when you see an abstract work?
Some things are very simple, and I think it's not fair for the artist
Yeah,
who.
but no, it's not. It's nothing. See, everybody has their own interpretation.
Yeah,
You may like
that's
it, you may not like it. Right?
Mm-mm-mm.
So it's definitely like there's nothing wrong in it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. If you like it, you like it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like even liking a person, it's the same. If you like a person, you like a person. If you don't like that person, you can't force somebody to like something.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
And then you see things like these in the market.
Yeah.
How many of you remember this? So this was from an exhibition in Art Basel, which happened, and this banana was sold. The artist copies of these bananas were sold for $120,000.
Wow.
So you see all these things, and it confuses you, and it makes you wonder what art is all about. Is it about money? Is it about the artist's history, or what he's making? Also, there are different aspects to it, and there is a sort of a chain of study that you need to understand where it's led to abstraction. This comes in the realm of conceptual art, which is far in depth, and there's so much to read about it. But like something that you don't understand or you don't grasp or you're not able to comprehend doesn't fall in the category of abstraction just because you're not able to understand it.
Yeah.
Okay. There are various studies on art, and there are different languages. So abstraction is just one of the languages in painting.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah, that's true. That's how it works. And so we have, I think a lot of you have looked at paintings and sculptures and asked this question: abstract art, is it really art? When you see people selling it for that much price, or you see a colorful painting with a lot of brush strokes, and you're like, oh, my kid can do that, or I could have done it. It's an accident, maybe. Or is there a certain way to understand abstract art? So I'm going to address all these questions through the whole session. The third question being, does every abstract painting have a meaning behind it? Okay. So as we go through the whole thing, let me give you a brief history about art in general, and it's going to be very brief and it's going to be very fast. So I've just added images in it so that you are able to recollect and remember as we go through. So from the olden times, we had kings and queens and the rich, because there was no cameras and the photography had still not come into existence. A lot of these artists, very skilled artists, were given commissioned works to paint these rich people, or monuments, or do sculptures or make sculptures of those people, or even paint churches and cathedrals all over the world. And it's been going on for centuries. So from the 14th and 17th century, the two most famous figures that I think everybody knows about them is you know who's the artist for this work? Anybody?
Is this Da Vinci or Rembrandt?
Yeah, it's Da Vinci, correct. So this is Leonardo da Vinci's painting called the Salvator Mundi. And so him and there's another artist who were very well known in the 14th to 17th century. There's another artist who painted.
Oh, Michelangelo?
Correct. So these artists had the role to play of creating works which were exactly or sort of like as close to reality as possible, because that's what the people who had commissioned them works wanted from them. Okay, and as years went by, people started, artists and sculptors started seeing different ways of expression. And in the 1870s in France, we had the rise of Impressionists. Whose work is this?
Is it
Monet.
Monet?
Correct. So the Impressionists used to work with the quality of light, the changing quality of light, and they didn't want to replicate the reality exactly, but they still wanted to be as close to the reality as possible. Who's this?
I-
This is
I
Rembrandt.
guess Rembrandt.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. So if you go to see the change from here to here has been how they're playing with light, correct? So the Impressionists started moving towards just how figures and light behave in a painting. And then after the Impressionists came post-Impressionists and artists like this guy. Who's this guy?
Van Gogh.
Van Gogh.
Correct. And what's the painting's name?
The Starry Night.
Starry Nights.
Amazing. Because it's replicated everywhere.
Starry Night by
All
Vincent
bags
van Gogh.
have it, shoes have it, wallpapers, phone covers, everything has Starry Night. But so these artists are known as post-impressionists, and they started moving much away from light, much away from the realistic world, and they were using color, texture to create their works. You understand? From year to year, you see the textures that have started coming in. So these are post-impressionists, and you had another painter from post-impressionist time, that was César. I don't think not many of you would have known. Sorry.
Paul Cézanne, yeah.
Uh,
His paintings has a proper outline for like every art he makes. His
Yeah.
outline is very obvious. Yeah.
So he has and then after the post-impressionists came. What is this? Whose artwork is this? Came Fauvism, which is another work, another style of art wherein it was not just textures, it was not just lines, it was not just light, it was colors, bright, striking colors that would grab you and pull you into the work. And this work is by Henri Matisse, which later on, I would take you through the process. So this was Fauvism, and then after this came, whose work is this?
Picasso.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Picasso's work. Came Cubism, and you had artists like Picasso and I didn't have the other artist. So after in Cubism, you see it's destructured. It still works with line, color, texture, but they started destructuring the whole reality of things. And that's the beauty of art. And the idea was basically to, like, for example, when you see things around you, people, structures, objects, the reason that you're able to see it is because of three things mainly. One being color, one being light, and one being texture. If there was no light in the room, how do I even switch this light off? Like right now, my features of my face dull down a bit because there's no light, but you still see texture to my face. But when there's light, there's more clarity to my face, is because it brightens up the whole space. And so abstraction, if you break down the idea of abstraction, it's about the idea of line, texture, color, and light. Sorry? That's also art, by the way. Okay, so moving on, and after this whole period came a lot of other things that happened. There was World War One, World War Two, and then artists started, and they were not able to understand and comprehend what's happening around the world, and they started losing faith in humanity. And the only thing that made them happy or they could find hope in was themselves. And then they started moving towards looking into themselves and seeing how expression worked for them.
Andrew, just 1 minute. I think someone, Ria Bhavnani, you are unmute. Maybe there is something in the background at your end. If you could put yourself on mute, please, Ria. Yeah, I think we can start, Andrew. And we have a hand. One second. We have a hand raised by Hitesh. Hitesh, do you have anything that you want to speak?
Oh no, this was way back. I should probably take that off.
Sure, no worries. All right, Andrew, you can start. Again.
Okay, so after this came how abstraction came into existence is how in the late 19th century, a lot of artists, after this whole calamity that was happening around the world, there was world wars and there was pain all over, misery all over, and artists started moving towards understanding how they felt about things, and expression had to be brought from within and not from the reality, and that made them to look within themselves to see things and experience themselves and create art, which was purely based, not, I wouldn't say completely based on emotional ideas, but there was still sense of self involved in the work of art. And then came abstraction into existence, and one of the finest works of art being done by an artist named William de Kooning. I don't know how many of you know about this artist or have seen his work in person or in museums.
Could you repeat the name?
William de Kooning.
William de Kooning. No, I don't remember.
So he has been the pioneer of abstract art. He was one of the first artists who moved towards abstraction, and he started using colors so vividly, and the brush strokes and the way he textured his canvases. So all these things creating. So his idea was very closely related to how musicians work. Like in his understanding of abstraction, he felt that art was like music. It had to create sort of vibrations when you look at it. You know, you cannot see music, but when you hear it, there's a sort of a calming effect that happens to you, or whatever. Not just calming effect; it can be anything. Any sort of genre that you listen to creates that sort of vibration within you. And came the next big name in the art world and the field of abstract art was this artist. I don't know how many of you know this.
Jackson Pollock.
Correct. So Jackson Pollock came up with this whole. So if you go to see, as years moved ahead and people started, these same artists in their previous years of working as an artist used to paint something what you saw here. And then they started moving towards abstraction, is because everybody at one point wanted to see how they felt about things, and everything just became too personal, and art was not just about creating what's outside, but what's inside is what became important. So Jackson Pollock was one of the first pioneers of drip painting. Like, he introduced drip painting to the world. These paintings may not look like, I also wasn't the biggest fan of Jackson Pollock till the time I saw him live. Like, not him because he passed away long back, but when I saw his paintings live in Tate Modern, and I saw works displayed in a gallery in White Cube, and that gave me the magnitude and the scale of this work and how massive these works are, but they also have such story within them when you look at them closely. And then came another artist who was very, very well known for his color-based, color-themed works, Mark Rothko. His works are purely about color, and his idea was to bring the viewer inside the painting. and a lot of his works is about pain and sadness and death, but like everybody has different sort of emotions when they see a work of art by him, and none of his works have sort of any structure to it as such, but they all are very lucid, floaty, have like this beautiful quality. The paint that he uses and the way he uses these paints have a very structured method to it. It may look very simple. Like right now, I may pull a piece of paper and then put yellow and put maroon and a little bit of purple and black and make this work, but it wouldn't ever closely even relate to this work because it has so much of layers of paints to it, and there's a method to creating a Rothko. Because I did a little bit of study about Rothko's work, and I had done a study work which I'll show you in the later part of the session. Then you had, so abstraction wasn't in, now why there are a lot of people from say America and UK and Southeast, more of the European names in art is because abstraction had still not reached India, because a lot of Indians were still making a lot of fine work, which was portraiture and Madhubani painting, which there was a session of by Art Circle. The previous session was by a Madhubani artist, miniature painting artist.
Miniature
Miniature
artist.
paintings. So a lot of art, abstraction had still not reached India. So when our artists, Indian artists, have started moving towards Paris and different other countries, they started seeing works by Rothko, by Jackson Pollock, and then they sort of had their own interpretation to it. And then they started making their own works, which were quite abstract in nature. And one of the names in Indian abstract art is S.G. Vasudev. Sorry, V.S. Gaitonde. Sorry about the names because there are a lot of names in art. So this is V.S. Gaitonde's work. He didn't call his work abstract art. He called his work non-objective, because there's no sort of structure to his work. There's no lines as such, but there is just pure color and the gradients of different colors mixed in a work. His philosophy, and he'd studied a lot of Zen philosophy, and that's how his works have this very strong effect of groundedness. Like it's quite grounded. When you look at the work, you feel humbled, and there's some sort of like peace that you see when you see a work like this. I had an opportunity to see this work in Saffron Art in Mumbai. And then you had another abstract, very popular name, S.H. Raza, whose whole work structure has been lines and squares and rectangles and semicircles, but it's purely abstract again. These kind of works are again known as, it's called, the artists usually who do a lot of color work are known as colorists, and the style of work that he did was geometrical abstraction, because there was a lot of geometrical shapes involved in his work. There's a very, if you read about S. Raza, you'll understand that you see this, can everybody see this cursor?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you see this circle, the black circle in his work. If you go to see any of his works, there is this bindu. It's called the bindu. He calls it the bindu, the black bindu in all his works. And there is a story behind his this use of this bindu in all his paintings, because so as a kid, when Raza was a kid, and there was, during his maths class, his teacher had punished him for talking in the class, and then he drew a circle with the chalk on the blackboard, and that memory left this mark in him. So basically, the maths teacher did that for him to concentrate, and that sort of like left this very strong mark in him, and that mark became his story in all his paintings. Like all his works have this black bindu, and it's sort of like this idea to concentrate and to look through a work and take it all in as you look at his works. And his works have. He was 99 when he passed away, and at the age of 99, also he was still painting, and his hands were still steady using the brush on the canvas or any medium that he used, paper and wooden panels. So, do you guys have any questions till now?
Where does surrealism fit in this timeline?
Oh, so that's a different timeline. Like it still has like in Fauvism and post impressionism, there were still breakdowns. Like abstract has a breakdown of expressionism, geometrical abstract, color abstract, action painting.
Okay.
So there are a lot of like if we get into that, we will never come back.
No, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. So everybody's clear now? Not clear, but let's move on. We'll move on to the next session, next part of the session.
Yes, sure.
So I'm going to take you through a process of my painting, a painting that I've done in London. The title of the work is Conversations in the Dark. And so this is a raw, unprimed canvas. And it took me about a month and a half to finish this work. But you'll see the development of the work so that it gives you a much closer process understanding of how I work. So I do a lot of writing. It's a part of my process. Every artist, not just abstract artists, but every artist has their own sort of style of process in creating work. And not everybody has the same. It's like, how many cricket fans here? I think a lot of cricket fans would be there. But not every batsman has the same style of, batting. Everybody has their own way. And that's how every artist has their own way of creating a work of art. So I do a lot of writing on my canvases. So there's a lot of background writing. It's just to take this confusion off my head or a question that's in my head that I'm thinking about. I would write it down and I keep working on it. So this was the time when I was researching about Mark making the idea of color field painting. And Mark Rothko is one of the pioneers of color field painting. And this work, you cannot see the writings anymore, but there is still a bit of writings in my work which are visible. Does anybody have a question on this?
Can you just explain, your name for the topic explains that it's a conversation in the dark, that's the concept. But as you mentioned that you had a lot of writings and you took 1.5 months. So what was exactly going on when you finished this painting and during the process?
Okay, so all artists personally for me, when I'm doing a work of art, I don't start multiple works together. I start just one work at a time or max 2 works. And the process has a lot of involvement with the brushes that I use, the techniques that I use, the mixes that I do. And also it took me 1.5 months to finish a work is also because this was an oil work. So oil paintings take a lot more time than acrylic works. Acrylic can dry within like 2-3 hours, depending on how many
Yeah.
layers you have put. But oil paintings take much more time to dry. This
Okay.
was and all the, so this work personally for me has been a questioning of my practice, because I've never used black a lot in my works. Previously, a lot of my works were much color based, like there was a lot of colors in it. But as you move in your practice, you find a rhythm or sort of like a comfort place where you start knowing that this is what you're good at. And only with like a lot of work experience, it's just like working in any other place as a musician or as any other, as a dancer. If you have the talent of dancing, you know that as years progress is when you know that you get better at it. And that's how for artists it is, like you keep working and you keep painting, and at one point or at multiple points you'll see a sort of like a turn that you'll take, and you know that this is what you like and this is what you, that is your expression is all about. So this work was basically a time when I was questioning this idea of mark making, the subconscious, and how I felt about things. It was sort of like a self reflection on my process and my practice. And my work is about the process. It's about the materials that I use, the elements that I use in my work. And that's about it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Andrew.
And this is another work. I don't have the process pictures of it because this took it took about 2 months to finish. It's a work on oil using pastels and pigments. This is a reference or sort of like a study work on Mark Rothko's application of pigments. You know Mark Rothko, right? I showed you the work of that artist. So this is Mark Rothko's work. If you Google Mark Rothko, you'll see a lot of his works. And so I used his process and understanding of how he mixed pigments together and created this work. Though it's not an exact replica of his work, because that's not what the intention was. It was to understand the process of Mark Rothko's application. So in a brief, and I would tell you that he had this way of mixing oil paints. He would mix pigments in a glass jar with 30% of solvent and 70% of oil, and he would mix these pigments and leave it for months. And I exactly did how he follows his procedure, and he leaves it for months. And then when you open the jar, you cannot move it. It should be unmoved. And you open the jar, the top part of the layer has the most translucent pigments mixed with the solvent and the oil. And then you use that to start layering the canvas. And by the end of it, you start using the jar. With like the end of the jar, you'll have like much thicker pigments, and then you use that to layer your canvas. And that was basically the process in creating this work. And it has a lot of oil pastels used in it. It was to create this depth, the effect of depth. Yeah, so this is that work, and that's the reason the title is untitled. So I'm going to show you a small part of this work. This work is called The World Can Wait. I started indulging in a lot of films and video works, which are so any sort of expression. It can be writing, it can be painting, it can be sketching, it can be creating films, or anything it can be. Everything and anything is art right now. But it has to be the truest form of expression. And so this work was, so the story behind this work was, when I moved to London, it was quite cold, and I was not so used to the cold, because some days it would be -1 and 1, and I would really feel cold at night. And I was sharing my house with two other, one girl and another guy from university, and both of them are from the UK. And they would say that, hey, don't switch on the heater so much because the bills may go up, and we'll have to share much larger amount to pay the electricity bills. And I was like, okay, fine. It's two versus one, so might as well just like say yes to them. And so, but I would feel cold. So what I would do after coming back from university, I would lit a candle, and in my head it would give me sort of this warmth, though technically a candle doesn't give you the warmth, but it was sort of like this time wherein I was lonely. I was away from family, friends, nobody around, and I missed home, and I sort of missed everything that I would call home. And every time I would come back from university, I would burn this candle, and it was sort of like this. I don't know. It became like a friend to me. It sounds crazy, but that's how it feels. And it was like giving life to an inanimate object. And then one day, I saw this candle burning, and I was like, okay, I'm going to film this. So I filmed the candle. So it's a 2 minute long film, so I thought I'll just show you part of it. So you understand, art is not just about creating something pretty, beautiful. It's about the thoughts that you have and the ways that the means that you use to express that thought. I could have done the same thing, the same expression of trying to share my feeling about how I felt about the candle or the feeling that I had that time by painting a candle. But filming it for me made more sense to it because it works with the whole idea of light, color, and has this quality of depth in it. Like when I was editing the film and I saw the film, and I felt like it had a world of its own. Like when you see the circle and you see things around it, I felt that there was sort of like a world of its own, and that's how all of us have like we are owners of our own world, and it's on us how we feel about things. And yeah, do you have any questions?
I just wanted to tell that it's a beautiful piece of work. So I really loved it out of the 3 paintings that you have shown. It's a nice one.
Thank you.
Excellent piece. Thank
you. Did everybody sleep? Can everybody make at least one little bit sound?
Andrew, we have one.
Yeah, okay. What were you saying, Prerna?
We have one question from Riya Bhavnani. She's put it in the chat. You can also read it. It says,
do we need to have a trained? Do we need to have an eye trained you to be able to decipher the intent behind these arts and appreciate these arts in deeper sense, especially for non-artists like me? Would you be talking about those aspects? So you don't need to have you don't need to have a specific way of looking at art. There is no right or wrong. It's about having an opinion. Tomorrow, if somebody brings a piece of paper in front of you and just keeps it and just walks away, won't you have an opinion towards it? Won't you have something to say about it, right? You will have anything. You cannot be blinded by it and be like, oh, okay. You'll have something to say about it, right? So the idea of understanding art is to have an opinion about something. So when you see a piece of work and you're not able to understand it and you're confused about it, give it time, because the piece itself will decipher the meaning for you. It's sort of like a relationship. When you fall in love for the first time with a man, with a woman, or the same sex, you don't want to know everything about that person, right? You want to, but it doesn't happen instantly. It takes time. It takes years. It takes, I don't know how many years, but it's a relationship that you build with. It's only when you like it. Only if you like art and if you think that you want to spend this time to understand it, take the time out and read about it, speak to artists, go to exhibitions, understand about art, because it will definitely benefit you. Because somewhere down the line, it's going to it's going to take you closer to the whole Maslow's hierarchy, if you have heard about. How many of you know about it? The end part of it is called self-actualization. So I believe personally that art is one of the many keys to attaining self-actualization. So if you are open to understanding art, it'll be great.
I had an experience with Rothko painting and SF MoMA once, but I think it took me a while to understand why there were so many layers of color being used, because at the end, the primary colors that you can see are a huge block of red and then below a huge block of blue. Initially, my interpretation was this is some kind of a sunset on the ocean, but then there was the interpretation of the opposing ends of like visible light, and then multiple such interpretations. So is it also about that journey of how you're trying to interpret the art? Because I had to sit there literally for like 10-15 minutes to figure out what the hell am I really looking at.
So there is like I'm the biggest fan for, like, Mark Rothko has been the person that I have always looked up to when I've seen colors. And when I went to Tate Modern, the same room, which is basically dedicated to Mark Rothko's work. So when he passed away and he had gifted these works to Tate Modern, he had specified to the museum that it has to be displayed in a certain light condition and in a certain way. And for the last 15, I think 20, 25 years, it's been displayed in the same condition with the same lighting. And his idea, the works are about, it's sort of like a door to something more. And that was the idea with which he created these works. Because when you see these works in tape, I don't know if I can show, if there is, I think there should be. Yeah. So this is, for all those people who are not able to relate to this, this is the work. This whole room is dedicated to Rothko's work, and all these.
We still see the presentation, Andrew.
Are you able to see this presentation?
Yeah, we're only seeing the presentation right now, not the other window.
Oh. No? Not yet.
Still seeing the
Andrew,
presentation.
you'll have to share the other part of your screen. Like, you probably shared only the presentation. So if you may have to share the whole screen if you want to, if you're trying to show something else other than your.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. 1 second. I'll just like put it here. Now are you able to see it?
Yes.
So this is the room dedicated to Rothko's work. And so the idea with which he made these works were, like, he was at, and there is this very eerie thing about knowing about yourself. When you're in touch with yourself completely, you know what's happening to you and you know what's going to happen to you. And Rothko sort of saw his end coming. He died of cancer though. No, he killed himself. Sorry, he committed suicide, and he was in a very depressed state of mind. But these works were his last set of works that he had created, um, and in his writings, these works were sort of a door to something. Not, I wouldn't say supernatural, but the writing said that it was a door to something more, and the idea was to leave the reality and have your own sort of reality. And these are these doors that he created using colors. Um, Now, not everybody has to have the same interpretation to the work. That's because I read about these. I'm talking about it in such a way. But if you look at a painting and you don't have any context to it, you have all the rights in the world to have your own context to it, because at the end it's you and the work. It's your understanding about something. So you don't have to obey the laws of art or the understanding of what people have about a particular piece, but you need to just know how you feel about it. The more you are in touch with yourself, the more easier it becomes to understand something which is not a part of you. Does that briefly or even closely answer your question?
Yeah. I had a follow up, but I can. So there's also this thing about psychology playing into these works of art.
Yeah.
For instance, I've heard about artists having conditions like synesthesia or something like that, where they or some condition which probably makes them see things a different way, and that's what they exactly project on the canvas.
Yeah, there are a lot of. It's not just conditions. There are a lot of artists who have, in their drunken state or completely drugged on some sort of drug, or are have these lucid thoughts because they have taken some sort of like acid, or and have created works which have then become masterpieces. Like, for example, this work by Jackson Pollock was created when he was completely drunk. He was drunk out of his mind, and he was in pressure to create a work for one of his commissions that he had received. Happy mistakes, I would say, but I wouldn't completely put it on the alcohol that made him to paint something like this. It's still within him to create a work like this, and he kept doing it for the next how many years he survived. He was creating works which were in the same sort of form, but not that every time he had to create a work he had to get drunk. So it's basically like it takes a lot of time to reach where these guys reached. Like as artists, it took them time to know themselves, to understand themselves, to look within themselves, to finally find the kind of work that they produced was in tune with them. So it takes a lot. It's sort of like a movement, and it takes its own sweet time. But you have to be at it, doing it every day, in and out. Whether you have a part-time job or a full-time job on your side to support yourself financially. But if you're somebody who's an artist who wants to do it, and who's curious enough to create works, and wants to discover things about themselves, or wants to interpret something, or has his own worldviews about things, and you want to express it, you have to do it every day. It's sort of like a ritual that you have to follow.
Interesting. Okay. So there's no trigger of any sort here. It's just something that you do over time, and you finally discover that medium of expression, or that right medium of expression. Like in Rothko's case, it was the layering of colors, and then those work with colors. With Jackson Pollock, it was the drip style.
So there's no methodology to it. There is no manual of being a successful artist, a millionaire artist by the next 5 years. There's no books written like that, or they'll never be written like that, because the one who made it never survived.
True.
So there is no sort of like a shortcut to it. It's sort of like a process, which is great, but it's fun. It's tiring. It's really exhausting emotionally, physically, but by the end of it, what you get out of it is really nice. Like, it's a feeling that no other emotion can ever fulfill. No sex, no drugs, no nothing can fulfill that feeling that you get through creating a piece of work which you know has been purely made by your self-expression. This is a photograph of my studio in London, a messy studio, which had to be cleared up later on. Sort of like I'm just giving you like an in view of how my process has been and how I used to create works, or still been creating works. When I didn't have space enough, I would take my canvases out in the garden and use materials from the nature to create layers, and I would structure my canvases that way. The marks that I made. So the beauty of abstraction is, I would say, when you give a small kid who doesn't understand language, I'm going to break it as simple as possible. So when you give a small kid who doesn't understand language, doesn't understand words, who cannot speak, and who's just started with dada mama, and you give him a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil or whatever, anything that makes a mark, he would still create something on the paper, right? Like, and you would not be able to understand it because you don't get his language, but he'll be able to understand it because in his tiny mind, he is still making these marks, and those marks mean something to him. So maybe, for instance, if you give your son, your daughter or your son a paper and he draws something like this, it still means something to the baby. But for you, it must be just like, oh, scribbles, nice. He started scribbling something. But that scribbles is very meaningful for him. So there is a quote by Picasso that says that it took him 5 years to learn to paint like a Raphael. Raphael is an artist who's very closely related to how Michelangelo worked. You saw the work of Michelangelo. But to paint as a kid, it took him lifetime. Because as you grow up, your expression becomes quite layered. You understand jealousy, you understand pain, you understand a lot of other emotions that you feel. You understand cheating, you understand a lot of other things that make your judgment and your expression quite layered. So to reach again a state of mind, an expression that is so pure, it takes time. And my process of working is about reaching that stage of mark making and understanding the subconscious mind. And that's what my whole research and studies has been about for so many years. Okay. Any questions? Or we'll move to the next part. It's any which ways, it's the end of the session.
Sure, yes.
So is it like
Andrew, this is Suresh.
Yeah.
So my intention, right? I mean, the abstract art is there, forever in front of me, and I've been to, the Chitrakala Parishad, exhibitions, and I've been to the hall separately when nobody was there. So what I got a lot of information today. Thank you for that. I mean, the different details and the depth that you have shared. But still, the unanswered question in my mind about this abstract painting is that I completely value the complexity and the level of depth when an artist put his expression into an abstract form. But what actually bridges the viewer? I mean, how does a viewer is expected to connect? I see a lot of impurity, or at least I perceive a lot of impurity when people, you've been either what do you call forced to understand something out of what you're seeing, or you are supposed to be finding out some meaning in that one, or is there something naturally should be emerging out and connecting to the viewer? I mean, what should a viewer should get from an abstract painting?
Okay, so I'm going to hold that question, and then is there anybody who has any other questions or has an opinion or anything else?
I think based on this question, it's a lot like wine tasting.
Yeah.
When someone in front of you is just saying, "I taste blueberries and pepper," and I would probably look at them and say, "I don't know what the hell you're saying."
Yeah, but I'm saying wine tasting still has an evidence of taste. Like, for example, it still has. Let's break it down to a much easier thing. Like, I would order a margarita, and I know it has cheese and sauce in it, tomato sauce in it, and somebody else will have the same sort of feeling closer to it, because there is an existence of a certain ingredient which is evident, which has like because it has a structure to it. Wine making is a process, and it has a structure to it, right? So you have, when people taste, and palates may be different. So I may taste blueberry, but I may not taste what you taste exactly the same way, because our palates are different. And so what happens and it becomes much tougher in art, is especially in abstract art, is because every artist has their own way of creating a work of art. There's no structure to it. There is no right or wrong to it. There is no first you take a pencil, and then the charcoal, and then take paintbrush, and then the bigger brush and the small brush. There's no structure to it. So one, there is no answer. Frankly speaking, there's no answer to the question that you asked, that how do you decode it? Like, there is no way to decode a subject. The only thing that I could say is, when you stand at a piece, in front of a piece of work, and then you look at it, just look at the way it's structured, the way the work is structured, the textures to it. So later, I have 3 questions that I would like all of you to keep with you for life when you move into a museum or a gallery to see works. But the idea is to look at a piece and not have sort of like, you shouldn't have a structured understanding to it from your perspective, but allow the work itself to speak to you as to how you feel about it. Are you able to understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So, how do I make it more simpler? So if you, it's okay. For example, a lot of us, we finish our, I don't know if it makes sense, but then a lot of us finish our 11th and 12th, and then 11th, and then we have to choose between science and commerce. Or after 10th, we have to choose between science and commerce or arts. And not that we have less intelligence, or like, not everybody is given. All of us have the same amount of intelligence, but it's our interest towards a certain subject that we take a subject. It's sort of like a similar inclination towards how art works. Not everybody likes abstract art. Not everybody likes fine work of sort of like fruits arranged in a basket, or a portrait work. Not everybody likes it. Everybody has their own taste to a certain thing, right? But the beauty of abstraction is that because it's non-objective, and there is no sort of any structure to it, and there's nothing within it that's dictating you to think about it, it's fluid in the way it is in your mind, and it's fluid in the way you understand it. For example, if you see a Ravi Verma, I don't know how many of you have seen a Ravi Verma painting, but when you see a Ravi Verma painting, which is a beautiful portrait, which has so much of elements to it, again, it has a lot of layers to it. But when you see that painting of this woman holding a lamp and standing, That's all you see day in and day out. You keep the painting in front of you, and that's what you're going to see all the time. But what happens with an abstract work of art is every time you walk in, what you feel is how you're going to see, and that's how your interpretation towards the work is going to be. So if you're upset and if you're sad, it's going to be comforting looking at a work of art, an abstract work of art, but it'll still have sort of a same emotion that how you're feeling is how the painting is going to emote. Because it's open to interpretation. It doesn't have a structure to it. It doesn't make you feel some. It's not intimidating. I feel like abstract art is one of those paintings or language of art which is not intimidating. Just because it doesn't just because you don't understand it doesn't mean that it's intimidating or it's confusing. If you allow it, it's magical. It has so much to it.
Okay. If I refine my question further, is there something beyond visual, anything non-visual viewer is eventually getting connected to or supposed to be getting connected to when they look at an abstract? Because that question is coming when I looked at your conversation in the dark. I mean, you mentioned that there is a month of work which is gone, and then I can, since you projected it, I can see a layer of work that you have taken, right? And at the end, majority of that image is coming out to be the black, layer at the top of it. And how does a viewer? I mean, do you expect? I mean, you, since you are the painter of that, do you expect the viewer to see beneath that at any given point of time?
No, not at all. Like, it's really nice to see people having different interpretations to a certain work, because then it helps you also to see something. Like when an artist, a film actor, has acted in a film, and he creates this wonderful movie which has crossed the box office and made a lot of money. Everybody has their own interpretation to the film, right? They may not like it, or they may like it, or they may hate it, or they may just love it. But it doesn't hamper the way that he's creating work. He'll never stop creating work, and he doesn't expect you to understand the effort or the work that he's put in. The whole idea is entertainment. And here also, for me, as an artist, I create. That's my job. But as a viewer, it's your job. It's on your will if you want to see my work and appreciate it, or how you feel about it. I cannot dictate you to feel this way or that way just looking at my work, right? Because it's your feelings and it's your authority on how you feel. So I wouldn't say that there is a certain way to look at a work, but it's just about opening up your mind to see something beyond that you don't understand or you're not able to comprehend. But you still give it a chance for it to reciprocate to you. It's sort of like a back and forth conversation between something that you see.
Makes sense.
Sorry?
Does it make sense?
It makes sense? Yeah, okay. I can continue the session for till like 8 o'clock if you want. So moving on, when you move into a gallery or museum and you're taking your time, keep this inside. Where is it? Keep this thing inside. Don't take selfies, because that's not the point of a museum. It's good to have memories, but if you're seriously looking at understanding art, give it a chance to speak to you. So you go, stand in front of it, and go around it to see how you feel about it, and observe, and not just see, observe every inch of it. Read about the artist, and then maybe later on, it's only for people who are interested in art or want to understand more about art, okay? So it's not a compulsion. If you get into a museum, if you want to go around and just chill and come back, it's fine. But if you're serious about understanding art, there's a lot of beauty to it, because you never know, you may find that talent in you, and you may end up being the next Mark Rothko without dying. So give it a chance. Okay, so this is just an information about. If you have any more questions about abstraction or anything related to materials, paints, how to use them, what to do about them, you can contact me through Instagram, email, and my Facebook page. And these are the 3 questions that I'm going to give you. Think about it. If you want to get a screenshot of it, so that every time you walk into an exhibition, these questions reflect something within you. So am I trying to figure out what it looks like or represents, rather than allowing something to emerge from it, what I see in front of me? What are the elements, colors, and textures of the painting? It's very important to see all these things, is because then it gives you a much better understanding as to how and why was the work created, and maybe it'll get you closer to the meaning of it, and not the exact meaning what the artist intended, but a meaning that you will find looking at these works. Like when we were kids and we were studying chemistry, before an experiment, you just don't rush into holding a test tube or a beaker and start mixing chemicals, right? You read about it before you start experiencing it. So that's the same way a painting works. You see the work, you understand the colors, you see the textures before you start experiencing the painting. And at the end, looking at the work, what emotion does this evoke within you? Makes you sad, makes you happy, makes you upset, makes you want to cry. And does anybody have questions? Okay, also, I have a very good recommendation for you to understand the art world or the art market. There's a film called The Price of Everything. I don't know if it's on Netflix. I don't think it's on Netflix, but you'll have to find out how you can find out